Hello and welcome back. Today we have the AFC East and the NFC East. We're going to break down each team, kind of look at like we did last week or with the other video, we're going to look at the fantasy options and look at their offensive lines and their quarterbacks. So let's go ahead and get this started. First up, we have the Miami Dolphins. Tua did not have a good year. You see there, 68.3. He's 25th rated quarterback, 25th rated quarterback in fantasy as well. I know they bring over Tyreek. They have Jaylen Waddle. They brought over Cedric Wilson. I don't think Tua is a very good quarterback in fantasy or in real life. You see there, 25 across the board. They are bringing in the weapons, so we'll see what they can do down there with the new head coach, a couple wide receivers, new running back. You see there, you have Myles Gaskin, who was there last year, 64.8. They brought in Chase Edmonds, 66.6. So, I'm probably not going to touch those running backs in fantasy. They're going to be stealing each other's touches, and again with not a very good quarterback, I don't see them scoring a lot of points. They might be able to get up and down the field, but I don't think they're going to be able to get those touchdowns. Mike Oseki, huge fan of his. I couldn't remember his name last week. 68.7, 21st per PFF at the tight end position, and he was tight end number 8 on the year. He plays more as a wide receiver. You line him up in the slot, and he's not a very good blocker when it comes to running the ball, which again really hurts those running backs. You look at that offensive line. They brought Terron Armstead in. I really like him. He's a good left tackle out of New Orleans. Really, pretty much average across the board. There was talk before they made the trade for Tyreek that they would draft a lineman, a tackle, or a tackle, or even a center. But obviously, that's not going to be happening until later in the draft this year. You look at wide receiver. You have Tyreek Hill. What can you say about Tyreek other than Patrick Mahomes' mom? Everyone else, from a football perspective, they love him. The guy, he knows how to get open. He's speedy, the cheetah. Great wide receiver. You see him there, 86.0, 6th rated wide receiver last year per PFF, and number 6 for fantasy. So, guy is a really good wide receiver. Like I said, really quick, knows how to get open. Had some problems with catching the ball a little bit, but everybody goes through that. Look at Chase last year, Jamar Chase. In the preseason, he couldn't catch a cold, and everybody was down on him. I didn't draft him, and I think he was drafted in the second round in our draft, and I didn't draft him. I wanted to wait a round or two. I was just a little nervous about him not being able to catch. So, wide receivers go through that. Jaylen Waddle, the guy's a stud. He had a good year last year as a rookie, 78.3, 18th rated wide receiver, 13th for fantasy. He's a good wide receiver. Those two make a hell of a wide receiver duo. The only problem is their quarterback. I watched him when he played the Jags. I watched a couple of his games. Really likes to just do a check down. I didn't see him really throwing it 20 yards downfield, which is going to hurt Tyreek. It's going to hurt Jaylen. I know Tyreek's going to go high just on name alone, and people that don't pay attention to fantasy and they just think, oh, Tyreek, he has Patrick Mahomes. So they're going to be caught off guard when they come up on their first week and he's not putting up those numbers that he did last year. But again, you have Jaylen Waddle, guy's a stud. You have Cedric Wilson, brought him in from the Cowboys. Had a good year last year, 71.7, 44th rated wide receiver, which isn't bad for a wide receiver 3 to be 44th. I mean, we saw some of the wide receivers earlier last week that were in the hundreds as a third wide receiver. So he finished 45th on the year for fantasy. I'm not. It's not that I'm staying away from this team because there are a couple players that I like. But again, Tyreek's going to go high. I know Jaylen will go. In our league, he'll be kept, but he'll go pretty high. You're kind of just trying to see if you can get Cedric at a decent price. Same thing with Oseki. I think he could have a good year. I'm staying away from those running backs. You don't know who's going to get the goal line work. It could be Miles. It could be Chase. That it kind of reminds me of Buffalo last year with Singletary and what was it? No, it wasn't Akers. Singletary and Zach Moss. They had two average running backs. Neither one of them flashed, and they hurt each other. And with fantasy, they hurt each other. So again, that offensive line's pretty average. You have a couple good guys, but other than that, not a lot going on. Tight end, I'm going to try to get Mike Oseki, depending on where he goes in drafts. But he was 8th last year. I could see people down on him again this year, but I think he'll be a good red zone target. A good red zone target. And, somebody that Tua can rely on. I know he'll try to force feed Tyreek and Jaylen, but he's going to have to throw it to somebody at some point outside of those two. And I think Oseki's the better player. He was there with them last year and the year before, and so there's some chemistry there. So yeah, out of this group, I'm taking Mike. Tyreek's going to go high. Jalen's going high. I won't reach on Cedric, but I might get him later in the draft depending on where he falls. And I'm not touching Tua. That's a given. Next up, you have the Patriots. And I actually did a short of this because I did not realize that Mac Daddy, had an 80.4 last year. He was 11th. That was a good job by me. 11th place. The 11th best quarterback last year per PFF. 18th in fantasy. Doesn't do a lot of running. He doesn't need to. I mean, if he can get some wide receivers around him, he's got a high ceiling. You have Damien Harris, 78.1, 14th rated running back. Ramondre Stevenson, 81.1, 10th, and he was 47. He's somebody that I'm going to look at. So when I look at this, I see the high PFF scores, and I see how far down they were fantasy-wise. You get those the fantasy owners that they don't really pay attention. They just go off in names, and I really like Ramondre Stevenson. I think he'll be able to start this year. He might not start the first week or two, but after that, he's going to take over. I really like him. And you look at their offensive line, David Andrews, Michael Iwanu. You always look at guards and centers whenever you look at running backs. So I'm pretty high on Ramondre Stevenson. Hunter Henry, he's just more of a football guy, less of a fantasy guy. 10th rated tight end last year for PFF, 17 for fantasy football. Him and Jonnu, they spent a lot of money to bring them in, but they needed help last year on that line, and so they kept him in there to block, which is fine because, again, Mac Daddy went off. So Hunter Henry, he won't get drafted. If he does, it'll be last couple of rounds. Nobody's going to reach for him at tight end, so maybe might want to grab him, see, is it Jonnu or is it him this year? What's going on? And then you look at wide receiver. Nelson Aguilar, not very good. 79th last year, 72nd in fantasy. Jacoby Myers, 74.7. He's 33rd at wide receiver. And then fantasy-wise, he was 29. Devontae Parker, they bring him in from Miami, 41st and 70th. And how much does that have to do with Tua? Devontae Parker is probably going to be the number one wide receiver out of this group. I'm not breaking any news there, but I'm going to try to get Devontae in fantasy, and then Ramondre Stevenson, and maybe Mac Jones as a second quarterback, or just a streamer, is somebody that can get you 15, 16 points while either your quarterback's hurt or he's on a bye week or he's playing a tough defense. Just somebody you can just throw in there. So if you're going to hold. If you're not going to draft a quarterback, you want to get him late. Mac Jones is somebody you can grab as a QB2 there at the end of the draft, or pick him up in free agency. Obviously, he won't get drafted very high coming off a rookie season. He did have a really good rookie season, which we see here, but he's not like a Jalen Hurts or a Lamar Jackson or anybody like that where he's going to put up the rushing numbers. So you're looking at he doesn't have a low floor, but he also doesn't have a very high ceiling. So again, he's just somebody you can throw in there. And then Nelson Aguilar, I'm not touching, and 64.8, that's not good. And Jacoby Myers, he played decent last year, 33rd, and then 29, so he's just outside of the wide receiver 2. But I could see Devontae Parker. He won't be a wide receiver 1, so don't draft him like a wide receiver 1. But you draft him as a mid to high wide receiver 2, somebody about mid round or mid draft that you can get. That's somebody I'm gonna try to pick up. Next up, you have the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen. Look at that, third in PFF, number 1 in fantasy. I'm trying to think of. I had him top 3 last year. I don't think I had him at number 1, but everybody saw it. I mean, he's got the rushing capability. He can pass the ball. He's got the wide receivers. So everybody saw that coming. Maybe not to finish number 1, but top 3. You have running back Devin Singletary, and I tried to do it in my mock draft the other day. I really wish that they would just take a running back in the first round and just get off of this 2 average running backs that they have. Pick up a Kenneth Walker. Pick up a I don't want to say Spiller because I don't think he's the right fit for that. But pick up a Kenneth Walker. Pick him up in the first round. Just do it. I just want to see some chaos on Thursday. They really do need a running back. He's an average running back, 34th per PFF, 18th in fantasy. Not a whole lot going on, in the run game. Dawson Knox finished 33rd per PFF and 17th in fantasy. And then you look at that offensive line. It's better than average. You got a 17th and a 24th and a 23rd. So they do have a good offensive line. Stefan Diggs finished wide receiver number 7 in fantasy. It's Stefan Diggs. Everybody's trying to pick him up or trying to trade for him. I know the guy in our league, it's pretty much impossible to get Stefan Diggs. You have him and Josh Allen. They're both relatively young. Stefan Diggs is just so good. He can just open up the field so much. Then you have Gabriel Davis, 81.5, 10th. And I was surprised by that. He finished with wide receiver 58 in fantasy. And again, I was very surprised that Gabriel Davis was that high. I know there was a lot of people that were putting a wide receiver to the Bills in the first round. Again, I would love if they took a running back in the first round, just fantasy-wise. I don't care about anything else, just fantasy-wise. Take a running back, and then hopefully that can open up a little bit more for Davis and Diggs. And then you have Jameson Crowder, 64.9, 76th, 63rd. He's just somebody you take as a flyer, if somebody gets hurt or if you need to stream somebody. And I had to do that last year. I had Jameson Crowder, and I just had him for a few weeks, just somebody I could throw in if somebody was hurt or, somebody was on bye week. So, again, Stefan Diggs is going to go high. He'll go first round in a lot of 12-man leagues. He'll be kept in our league. Gabriel Davis is somebody I'm going to keep an eye on, see, how far he goes up in the draft. If he's being slept on, I'm definitely going to try to pick him up whenever I can. And then Jameson Crowder, again, I'm not drafting him. He'll probably be dropped week 1 or won't even get drafted. So we'll have to worry about that. But again, I'm really hoping they pick a running back. I think that'd be great for fantasy. He'd be whoever it is, Kenneth Walker. They would shoot up the draft board, and that just pushes running backs down and other players down the board. So fantasy-wise, it would help a lot. I know real football, maybe a corner or somebody like that, or a wide receiver would fit better there. And then a wide receiver would work. If you get like a Chris Olave or a Jahan Dotson or a Christian Watkins, somebody else in there that can open up the field a little bit, take Jameson Crowder out of it, then that could work. But just right now, just give me that running back and just watch him behind that offensive line and with Josh Allen. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Next up, we have the New York Jets You have Zach Wilson, not very good, 59.3, 34th rated quarterback, 30th quarterback in fantasy. He had a few games, that he did good in, that he did decent to good in, but outside of that, it was kind of an abysmal season, just like Trevor Lawrence. You have Michael Carter, who got drafted pretty high in our draft, and I wanted him. He was just drafted too early. Shows a lot of potential. He finished his fantasy running back number 29 last year. They brought in C.J. Uzomah from the Bengals, which, looking at these PFF scores, I didn't think he was that bad. I thought he was good. I picked him up a lot in DraftKings, and he did good. He would get you a touchdown or two. So like I said, a little cut off guard by that, but they did need a tight end, so that helps. Bring in somebody that can catch the football. You look at that offensive line. Again, we were talking about them taking a tackle in the either at 4 or 10 because of Mekhi Becton. What's going on there? We don't know. I keep seeing rumors of they just want to move on from him, and then I see people commenting, and they're just like, no, this whoever it is, whatever reporter it is just doing it, just trying to get clicks. So what's really going on with Mekhi Becton? But not a bad offensive line. Then you look at wide receivers, Elijah Moore. There's not a lot to work with there. I do think the Jets will take a wide receiver, probably at 10, but either 4 and 10, they'll take a wide receiver. And then that other position could be a tackle. Could be on the defensive side of the ball, but it could be a tackle. They're fine at running back, so I don't see that happening. And you do have Elijah Moore. He finished wide receiver 50 last year. Then you have Corey Davis. They brought him in last year. He finished number 69. Nice. At wide receiver. And then you have Denzel Mims, who had a horrible PFF grade, and I keep seeing people talk about cutting him. And I talked about that last week. And I think he has a potential. I mean, he was sick last year. He had COVID, and he had a stomach bug. And yeah, I still think he's a good player. But overall, I'm looking at Michael Carter. Elijah Moore when I can. And then outside of that, I'm kind of staying away from this team until Zach Wilson can prove otherwise. Can he make that second-year leap like we see a lot of quarterbacks do? Or is he just going to be average this year? And if he's average, Elijah Moore is about the only guy I want to touch. If he does have a good year, I could see Corey Davis having a bounce-back year. But they are going to need another wide receiver and probably a little some work on that offensive line, at least for depth, even if they draft somebody in the second round. I think they have 2 picks in the second round, and they're pretty high picks. So they could take somebody there as well. And maybe get a wide receiver, maybe get Sauce Gardner if you can at 4, or Derek Stingley at 4, or Evan Neal or somebody. Just try to get somebody to help you out there, and then take a wide receiver in the second round, take a Christian Watkins or Jahan Dotson, maybe a Sky Moore. So we'll see what they do there. But like I said, as of right now, Michael Carter and Elijah Moore is who I'm getting. We'll see where Corey Davis is. Once the best ball drafts start popping out left and right, we can start to kind of gauge a little bit where he's at. And then Denzel Mims, as much as I like him, I'm not touching him. Next up, we have the NFC East. We have the Washington Commanders. We have Carson Wentz, which automatically makes it where I don't want to touch any of these people on here. I don't want the running backs, the tight ends, the wide receivers. We saw last year Jonathan Taylor, maybe a little bit of Michael Pittman, but that didn't have too much to do with Carson Wentz. That was just their talent. So you see Carson Wentz finishes 23rd per PFF, and he actually rated 13th in fantasy, which I was very surprised on. I haven't been a fan of Carson Wentz in a couple of years, and I even told my Colts buddy and Tanner that I'm not a fan of Carson Wentz. He's not going to do anything, and we had arguments before the season, and then towards about the middle of the year, he's just Carson's not good. So we all saw the writing on the wall whenever he got traded. But then you have Antonio Gibson, 63.3, running back last year, and then running back number 10. So I saw that, and I was a little confused on why he did so bad per PFF and still finished pretty high. You have Logan Thomas, and then you look at that offensive line. That offensive line's pretty decent. 12, 42, 4th, 9th, 30th. That's a pretty good offensive line. Terry McLaurin, 18th rated and 25th wide receiver. Curtis Samuel, 178, and Damien Brown, 146. So there is a huge drop off from Terry, and I've seen a couple mocks where they do draft a wide receiver in the first round. They don't need a running back. They're obviously not going to draft a quarterback this year. And then that offensive line, that's a good offensive line. So wide receiver or the defensive side of the ball, which I could see. But on this team, we'll see how far Curtis Samuel falls down the draft board. I know Antonio Gibson's the check down guy, and I know that's where Curtis Samuel can get some of his catches from. But you do have Antonio Gibson there, who's a receiving wide receiver. He was a wide receiver in college. So you do have some playmakers on that team, some quick guys that can break some tackles, and you have Scary Terry. And whenever Scary Terry's on the field, you never know what's going to happen. He get a touchdown anytime he catches the ball. I tried to trade for him a lot last year. The guy's just a baller, so we'll see what Carson Wentz does. If he pulls him back down to earth like he does with every other wide receiver, or can Carson have a bounce back year, which I don't see happening. But like I said, Curtis Samuel, I'm going to try to get him late in drafts. Scary Terry's going to be kept in my league. And, in regular leagues, let's see if people get scared because of Carson Wentz and they kind of hold off on him a little bit. And then Antonio Gibson, behind that offensive line, I'm drafting Antonio Gibson. I know they have J.D. McKissick. They go back and forth, but I'm a big fan of Antonio Gibson. Fantasy footballers, shout out to them. They said before his rookie season that he was gonna bust out and have a good year, and that's the main reason why I drafted him. I had never really heard of him. I think it was Mike on there was talking about him, and he called it, and I was able to trade him. I think I traded him for Joe Mixon, and so that definitely worked. But yeah, they do have a good offensive line. I'm going to try to take Antonio Gibson and Curtis Samuel. Definitely Scary Terry if he's there. And then Damien Brown. I doubt he gets drafted. Curtis Samuel is just going to get drafted on name alone. But then Damien Brown, that's somebody that you could, if you do draft him, it's real late in the draft. Or you're picking him up after the draft before week 1. Next up, you have the Giants, and you look at this. I'm just going to give you a minute to look at this. All right. So you have Daniel Jones, 71.6, 21st quarterback, 27 fantasy. Saquon Barkley, 59.1, 58th rated running back. And I know he was hurt some last year, coming off an ACL. He's running back 30. Jordan Akins, 52.5, 66th. Doesn't even make sense. 66th. Tight end number 19. Andrew Thomas. Mark Lewinsky. That's about all you're talking about on the offensive side of the offensive line. They need a lot of help. Cadarius Tony, there's a ton of trade rumors right now with him being traded. I don't know what I talked about in the last video, so I'm not going to get into it too much, but he has all the talent in the world. And, you see that PFF grade, 72.8, and he didn't even play that much. He's got a lot of talent, and he's just, yeah. Then you have Kenny Goliday, who I wasn't going to touch with a 10-foot pole last year, and I'm glad I didn't. He went pretty late in our draft. He just kept falling, and finally Tanner's just like, somebody has to pick him, and he did. And then I think he ended up cutting him. I don't think he really had him much of the year. Daniel Jones is just not a very good quarterback. He can't throw left. I was looking at his plays the other day, and his spread whenever he throws the ball, and just watching him throw left is not good. Doesn't have the arm power for it. And Kenny Goliday is not a separator. He's just somebody that's going to go up and get the football. But when you don't have a quarterback with any touch or that can throw it downfield, it's hard, for Kenny to do that. So I see him falling down again this year. And then you have Sterling Shepard, who just seems to be hurt every week. Finishes wide receiver 95 last year. So, they do have, they have 5 and 7. Do they draft? I don't think they'll draft a wide receiver. They're not going to draft a running back, obviously, or a tight end in the top 7. I could see them working on the offensive side of the offensive line, grabbing a tackle, grabbing an Evan Neal, grabbing a cross to put him on the right hand side. Maybe put him in at left guard, try to help out Saquon a little bit, try to get Daniel Jones some more time. But I think they're just trying to slowly build that team back up, and then they'll spend the other pick on the defensive side of the ball. But they have way too much money in wide receivers, and they're not going to draft a wide receiver in the top 7. Maybe later in the draft, but not in the first round. So if they do get a Neal and put him on the right hand side, it's 2 pretty good tackles that you have on the outside, and then he's got to slowly start working on the guards. Maybe they pick up one later in the draft, and and try to help out Saquon as much as they can before they trade him. And that's something, as Saquon owners, if you're in a dynasty, he's getting up there to that point, close to that 28, where he's starting to run off and not run off, but starting to come back down to earth, and he has had injuries, and they have run him a lot. This is, you're hoping that he has a couple games this year where he can just break out, and then you're just trying to trade him as quickly as possible. But yeah, that's not a good offensive line, not a good quarterback, not a good tight end, not good wide receivers. Again, with Tony, if he gets traded or cut, there's nothing there. This is a team that I am going to stay away from. Saquon, if the price is right, I can trade for him because he might have a touchdown or 2 in a game when I need it. But outside of that, there's nobody else I'm drafting or really reaching for either. Next up, you have the Dallas Cowboys. You have Dak Prescott, finishes 10th and the 7th rated wide receiver quarterback last year. You have Zeke, who finished PFF. He was 32nd. And I do want to look at this real quick, and I put the running back so close together because you see Tony Pollard. He was 86.0. He was the 4th rated running back last year. And you have Zeke, who is 32nd. And he signed that massive contract a couple of years ago. And I know you hear it all over the place, but they lost Amari Cooper because of that signing, because of that extension. And he's not putting out like the numbers that he used to. They just ran him into the ground, and it sucks, but it happens. And you see it all the time with Todd Gurley, players like that, where it's just they just hit a certain age, and they just hit a certain snap count, and they just can't do it anymore. They age so quick. That's why it's so big to get, especially if you're in a dynasty league, to get those running backs, those young running backs up the top of the draft, and then keep them for a couple of years and then trade them. You got to trade them for younger players. You just can't hold on to them for namesake. But I will say Zeke did finish as a running back 7 last year in fantasy. Can he do it again this year? Tony Pollard, he's mainly in there on passing downs, and that's just the way the offensive coordinator likes to do it. He didn't really, and that was another reason with Cooper. He wanted to throw the ball to CD or Tony. Wasn't that big on throwing it over to Cooper. So that contract definitely hurts. So Tony Pollard, he's somebody. I was talking about Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb the other day. If Chubb goes down, Kareem Hunt's just a running back 1. Tony Pollard's the same way. He's one of those guys. Those are like the 2 big guys that you're drafting. They're gonna be a good flex week in and week out. But if their running back goes down, they just skyrocket. So that's why I wanted to put him so close. Then you have Dalton Schultz, 6th rated tight end last year, and he's tight end number 3 in fantasy football. And you look at that offensive line, and I talked about it in my mock draft that I think they need to draft an offensive line in the first round. You have Connor McGovern, 34th, and then you have Terrence Steele, who I know a lot of Cowboy fans are a fan of. to come in and take over that right tackle position. But if he can do it, great. If not, at least you have a little bit of backup. Zach Martin, he's been injured and he's getting older, and Tyron Smith's the same thing. So I would work on that offensive line, but we'll see what they do, what Jerry Jones wants to do. Then you have CeeDee Lamb, 84.1, 19th rated wide receiver in fantasy. Michael Gallup, 77, and James Washington comes down from Pittsburgh, 107. With James Washington, was that as much as of Big Ben's fault for that 107 than his, or is James Washington just an average wide receiver that you just throw in and that can catch 2-3 receptions a game and put up 40-50 yards and just call it a day. So we'll see. And you got Michael Gallup, he can spread the field, loves to run down the field, and you have CeeDee working underneath. So we'll see what they do with James Washington. Will he be the possession receiver that they need since they don't have Amari? CeeDee's going to be kept in ours. Michael Gallup's going to go pretty high because he is a wide receiver too in this offense. James Washington is who I'm going to try to grab late in drafts, because I think he could be that possession receiver, the guy that they go to when CeeDee's being double teamed and Michael can't get downfield. He's got a safety going over top. James could be that guy that they could give him the first couple downs or couple first downs and that would help you as a fantasy owner. Somebody that's not going to put up 20 points a game, but might put you 8 or 10. I mean, I'd take that. Somebody throwing the flex when somebody's injured, or, I could use it to trade piece when somebody gets injured on another team. And then Dalton Schultz. I am a huge fan of Dalton Schultz, and I'm glad he had a good year last year. He'll go high in drafts. I'm going to try to get him, but because I do like tight ends, and I like to talk about tight ends. You have him and Blake Jarwin. I like both of them. I think they're a really good duo of tight ends. So I'm going to try to either grab Dalton or, maybe Blake at the end of the draft. And just in case they're going to 12 personnel a little bit now that they don't have Amari and they're trying to mix it up a little bit. So, with this team, Dak, I'm going to try to draft Dak. I still think he's a really good quarterback. Zeke, I'm not gonna touch. Tony Pollard, I'm going to try to draft later in the draft. In my draft, he'll get picked up pretty early because the other guys think the same way as me. Dalton Schultz, I'm going to try to draft. CeeDee's going to be kept. Michael Gallup, I'm probably not going to have too many shares of Michael Gallup. And James Washington in the late rounds, mid to late rounds, I'm going to try to get him as maybe a wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4. Probably wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 actually. Wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 that might have high upside, and if not, I'd cut him and go on to the next guy. And lastly, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. I was surprised with the PFF score for Jalen Hurts, 14th. I didn't think that they liked him. They show he's an average quarterback. He finished 9th in fantasy football. I looked at his run and passing scores, and it was so lopsided. I want to say his passing scores were like either high 60s or low 70s, and his running scores were, mid 80s. I think 85 or something. So, in fantasy, you want that. You want those rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. So, Jalen Hurts is somebody I'm gonna try to grab. He was 9th last year. Our teams, in my leagues, like I always talk about, in my league, he'll probably go high. He'll go, you'll have the Lamar Jackson, the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allen. They'll go really high. But Jalen Hurts is probably the next one off the board, which I'm not drafting him at wide receiver. I'm not drafting him at running back. Jeez, it's pretty late. I'm not drafting him at quarterback 4, but if he were to fall down, quarterback, he won't fall to quarterback 6 or 7, but if he were to fall down to round 8 or 9, I might try to draft him. Then you have Miles Sanders, and I talked about it in my mock draft that maybe they should start thinking about drafting a running back. Miles Sanders, his contract is up after this next year. Do they re-sign him? What are they doing there? He was fantasy ranked 45th last year. Then you have Dallas Goddard. Dallas Goddard had a huge year. Once they got rid of Zach Ertz and he went to Arizona. Dallas just had a great year after that. Finished second among tight ends, tight end number 8. Without a passing quarterback, that's amazing. And then you looked at that offensive line. Third, 10th. You had a couple guys that didn't play enough. Brandon Brooks right there. That's just an eyesore, 52.7. They traded one of their. Did they trade both? I think they just traded one of their first round picks, but I thought that maybe they could grab an offensive lineman there in the first round and slide him in. I know a lot of people had Tyler Linderbaum at a couple months ago going there and taking over for Travis Kelce. Put him in at guard, left or right side, and he could take over, and that's still a possibility that they could do that. They do need some offensive line work. Those tackles and that center are great. But those two guard spots they're question marks. Then you have Devonta Smith, Jalen Reagor, and Zach Pascal. Everybody loves Devonta, and this is where, because Jalen is a running quarterback, I get scared. It's the same thing with the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. I try to stay away from their wide receivers. I try to get their tight end, but that's what this offense reminds me of. They do need a better running back, but just try to mimic the Ravens. But you have the quarterback, you have the tight end. The wide receivers scare me. They want those quick guys that can get open. You had Devonta Smith, finished wide receiver 30 last year, Jalen Reagor at 94, and then Zach down there at 74. Devonta's the only one that graded higher than 60 last year. He finished as wide receiver 22, so he'll be kept in my league. He'll probably go high just because he is the wide receiver 1 in that offense, but I'm not touching Miles Sanders, and I said it last year. I didn't want Miles Sanders. I don't trust him. I think they do need to draft a running back at some point, maybe this year. And then Dallas Goddard, I'm going to try to get him as much as possible. Same thing with Jalen Hurts. So fantasy-wise, I'm looking at Jalen, I'm looking at Dallas, I'm looking at Devonta. Outside of that, I really don't want much of this team. I'm not touching Sanders with a 10-foot pole, and he'll go pretty high because he is a running back. He is a starting running back. Then you have Jalen Reagor, who people still remember, that quick guy that can get open, but it's hard to be a wide receiver 2 on a team like this or an offense like this. So, yeah. That's my video for the night. It's a little bit shorter. I didn't have as much time. Like I said the other day, we did have family in town this weekend, and so I didn't have as much time to work on my video. And what are we? 2 days? What's today? Is today Monday or Tuesday? Today's Tuesday. Wow, that just shows to show you where my mind is right now. Today's Tuesday. The draft is Thursday. My plan is just as soon as the draft starts, I'm just going to have a live stream of it, and just give my commentary and just have people comment and just answer questions, or, just have a conversation. That's all I want to do is just have a conversation. I love making videos. I love football, and I love fantasy football. So if I'm not right 100% of the time, that's fine. And I'll be the first to tell you I'm not. I don't get paid for this. I do it because I like it. I like to talk football. So if you're bored and you wanna hop in the live stream and just make comments like, oh my God, I can't believe the Jaguars picked a corner at number 1, or I would say won't do. But just stuff like that. Just I hope they don't do it. It's the Jaguars. You never know. But just have a conversation. Keep it clean. Keep it friendly. But just talk and just hang out. So that's what I plan on doing on Thursday night. I'm going to crack open a couple beers and just talk football. And if nobody's in there, that's fine. I'll do it myself. But if there's even a couple people in there, we could just have a conversation, talk fantasy football, talk the NFL. Why not? All right. Well, you guys have a good night.